The Championship relegation battle has been almost as fascinating as the playoff scramble and the automatic promotion race this season, just because there's been a high points bar, I think, for relegation that looks like it's going to maintain until the end, which what that's done has made it very unpredictable, and it's dragged in teams that on paper, in theory, would have had too many good players to get sucked in. Leicester City and West Bromwich Albion, the classic example, who lie either side of that dotted line on 32 and 33 points respectively. Sandwiching those are Blackburn and Oxford, who currently find themselves in the bottom three, Leicester and West Brom just outside, I should say. And Charlton and Portsmouth, who have put themselves in good positions recently through a few decent results, but are still a little bit too close for comfort. So, who is going to stay up in the Championship this season, and who is facing that ominous trapdoor to League One? That's what we're here to discuss on this Championship podcast. So if you like what we do here, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. And if you've been following us on YouTube for a while, we also now have a members option where you can get bonus content exclusively to members, and you can join our WhatsApp, our lively and thriving WhatsApp communities as well. So do consider that if you fancy supporting us. Delighted to be joined by Jack Ward, an Oxford United fan and a very successful YouTuber as well. Jack, from a neutral point of view, well, not a neutral, you're actually an Oxford fan.
Oh, we're waiting for it, Gab. I wish I was.
Neutral, not neutral at all, but if you can put your neutral hat on.
Yes, I will try.
How would you unpack the relegation dogfight in the Championship right now?
It's fascinating, isn't it, Gab? Like you just said there, it's really quite fascinating because teams that weren't meant to be in the conversation now are. I think teams that people have tried to exclude from that chat, maybe at the bottom end, are still in with the conversation and in with a chance of staying up and also equally going down as well. I feel like every week I want to sort of exclude a team and then they lose a couple and then you've got to put them back into that, into your head. And then, you know, the same applies. A team loses twice and you go, I think that might be them out of this. I don't see a way back. And then they go and get a good result or string a couple of good results together. And then suddenly the fight is back on. So it's ever changing. But I think we've probably got our select bunch. It's now about how we crucially order that bunch. And of course, we'll only find that out come the end of the season, but we can have a chat. It's worth chatting about it. It's worth putting our opinions out there because that really matters, doesn't it? That's going to make all the difference.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're agreed it's a case of 2 from 6 in the relegation dogfight at the moment. I think that's we're on pretty safe ground with regards to that. So I'm delighted to be joined now by my first guest, which is Chris Hall from Albion Analysis. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris. Has it come as a surprise to you that West Bromwich Albion find themselves in this position?
Well, from where I thought we'd be at the start of the season, yes. But from where, from how the season's gone, no, not particularly. I mean, this has been a sort of slow trudge towards this situation, and it's not really, you know, obviously people have pointed the finger at Eric Ramsey over the last sort of 4 or 5 games. But the reality is the only reason that those 4 or 5 games dragged us briefly into the bottom 3 before a stunning 0-0 draw against Stoke City managed to poke our heads back above water again for the time being anyway, is because of where we were when we appointed him anyway. We were playing with fire. I feel like it's massively flown under the radar how sort of like for much of the season we've sort of been sleepwalking into this situation, because I don't know whether it's the whole too good to go down type thing. I don't know whether it's what it is, but really since December, and I mean even before December, you look at the 2 wins that we had that kind of papered over the cracks a little bit at home to your own Oxford, Jack, and then against Swansea. We still went behind in both of those games. So we were far from convincing, and then we've obviously gone on this run from December onwards that's sort of seen us only win twice in that period. We haven't won since the 29th of December against anyone. We've picked up 2 draws out of the last 3, which I suppose constitutes progress. But equally, the other side of that coin is we've scored 1 goal in our last 4 games, and that was a sort of 97th minute equaliser against Derby, which goal line tech had to give anyway. There's not a lot of positives really going on. The big positive is that on Saturday against Stoke, Eric Ramsey abandoned this kind of very, very failed experiment at a 5-man defence, which had seen us ship 5 against Norwich and 3 against Portsmouth and 3 against Middlesbrough, and went to a back 4.
I think that's good. I think it shows he's got a little bit of pragmatism about him, and he's not just going to play.
I mean, there's an element of that, Gab. There's another element of how much punishment was he prepared to take with 5 at the back? You know, I mean, I'm not being funny, mate. But if you concede 12 goals in 4 games, you probably think you need a change of shape somewhere along the line.
Yeah,
so,
but you know what I think, Chris? I think now is definitely the time for being very realistic, because I don't think the fitness regime in the summer was good enough. I think there are massive issues with that. I think there's big question marks probably over the recruitment and certain areas like that. I think the players are low on confidence. So you've just got to put together a template that can tick off enough points, and however you do that. And in the summer, if you want to build more of an idealistic template, that's one thing, but you've got to earn the right to do that and make sure that...
of course you do, mate. I mean, what I would say to the fitness stuff, though, is that I've heard this from a few people, and I know it's sort of it very much, people use it to try and explain the volume of late goals that we've conceded, which obviously is far too many. But Ryan Mason kept saying, you know, we run more than anybody else in the division. Our running stats are higher than anybody else in the league. Why I would suggest is, rather than us being unfit, I think we've been I don't think we've been very productive in our use of our energy.
Interesting.
I think it's more that I think we've ran around like mad March hares at times, and hence why we're absolutely knackered come the end of the game.
I've seen games, Chris, just to come in there. I've seen games where you'd start amazing. I went to the Oxford game, right, and in November, I think it was, and you were really good all over them in the first 10 minutes, and within 5 minutes of that, you was like almost like a low block. It was like drop off alarmingly quickly, and that would raise a question mark for me about endurance, because I remember speaking to some of my Albion friends. I have got some as a Birmingham City fan, so now I spoke to some of them, and they won't have
any after tomorrow night, mate.
I was hoping we could have. Well, I don't know whether it's a good thing to have the podcast on before the game or...
I was going to say, I find it very hard to laugh and be jovial about Albion at the moment. You know me, I've usually got a sense of humour with these things, but I've got to be honest, even my sense of humour's got tested. But I do take the point you make.
Sure.
What I would say is, I just think we've been a deeply unproductive side all season. I think what we did under Ryan Mason was... that we started the season trying to be solid and winning games 2-0 and winning games 1-0 and stuff like that. And then teams sort of found us out a little bit and sort of went, well, they've actually got a very limited level of threat now that Tom Fellows has gone. So let's just let's sit off and be really difficult to beat, and Albion won't score. And then we went 6.5 hours without scoring a goal. And then Ryan Mason tried to flip us a little bit and make us more offensive. But kind of, to use Carlos Corberan's blanket analogy, he pulled the blanket up too high and our feet got cold and our defence got bad. And I just don't think we've ever really quite found the solution. I think what Eric Ramsey has done certainly for the Stoke game, what he did was he went, well, actually, the expectation has shifted from what Ryan Mason inherited, because what Ryan Mason inherited was expectation of a top half finish. And actually now the expectation is nothing more than stay in this league. And you actually don't need to win that many games to do that. So there's very little need to go gung-ho and start trying to win every single week, if we can start actually being solid and eking a few points out here and there, Wednesday are gone. So as you say, it's 2 spaces left. Obviously, at the moment, Jack, we've got a little bit of a cushion over you, although we all know how fast that can disappear in this league. And obviously, Blackburn are a little bit of a dark horse in the sense of we don't know who they're going to bring in as manager. We don't know the impact that's going to have. But if you take Blackburn as they sit right now, then they're a poor side who can't get results. So if you look at it right now, what you would say is being solid and getting points or maybe the odd 1-0 is the order of the day. The problem for Albion is that every result, like the one we got against Stoke, for months and months and months now, has been followed by just a total and utter letdown in the next game. We beat Swansea. We got done by QPR 3-1 in the next game. We beat Sheffield United, and then we give away a daft penalty at Hull and lose 1-0. We beat QPR at home, and then we go and lose a total non-event of a game at Swansea. And then under Eric Ramsey, you come back to 2-2 against Middlesbrough and okay, lose it in the last minute. But that gives you a bit of hope. Then you get done 5-0 by Norwich. You get a last-minute draw at Derby, and you think, here we go. This is the Eric Ramsey reign starting. And then you get smashed 3-0 at Portsmouth. And that's what we need to stop. The false dawns have got to stop now. It's got to be... nobody's expecting spectacular 1970s Ron Atkinson free-flowing Albion here. What we just want is back-to-back, solid, dependable performances. Even if we go to St Andrews at Knightsbridge Park, whatever you want to call yourselves these days, and get done 1-0 tomorrow. Just don't go there and it be another Portsmouth or another Norwich.
Get smashed.
Yeah.
I think I was going to say, Chris, I did a video on Eric Ramsey when he was appointed, and I did a bit of digging on his time at Minnesota. I sort of tried to because that was quite challenging, really, because that wasn't really cut and dry. There were lots of sort of different nuances to the way that he had his team in America. And one thing that has really, really surprised me is what you've just said there about adaptation or lack of adaptation. The fact that, and I was sort of banging on in that video, and something everybody said over in America was the guy is very, very adaptive. He sort of fits a team into the strengths of the personnel that he's got, which was something that they were really, really keen on doing. That being said, the style of play I don't think has massively changed. It was never free flowing. It was pretty direct. It was, it was probably, I'd say, nearly totally opposite to what Ryan Mason was trying to implement. Were you surprised by that lack of adaptation? Because that was something that a lot of Minnesota fans and people that were far more invested in his time in America than probably me and quite a few West Brom fans, that didn't really happen. You sort of continued playing a system that very evidently wasn't working.
For 4 games, yeah, but I mean, it's worth saying it has only been 5 games. I mean, we're talking a really small sample size here.
Sure.
And I mean, look, I don't think I'm ever massively surprised that a manager who's had success at his previous club comes in and tries to implement the same things that brought him success at the previous club. I think the bigger question mark was he the right man? And I don't mean this disrespectfully to Eric Ramsey, because anybody who listens to my podcast will know that I've been quite pro Eric Ramsey, and because I heard the same things as you, Jack, and I came away with an incredibly positive opinion of the guy. So I was really quite enthusiastic when we hired him, and I was enthusiastic when we were linked with him in the summer. But you've got to ask yourself the question: Albion with no money, with a relatively small squad that doesn't fit 3 at the back and wing backs. Why hire a guy mid-season who is clearly going to at least come in and try that from the off? Because if you don't want Eric Ramsey to play Eric Ramsey football, don't hire Eric Ramsey. It would seem the fairly obvious solution. Now, credit to Eric Ramsey. Okay, it took him 4 games, maybe, but in all fairness to him, what I would say, because Albion fans will say that's 4 games too many. As I keep saying, Middlesbrough, okay, we went 2-0 down, but we came back and got it back to 2-2 and then just conceded in injury time, which frankly is nothing to do with Eric Ramsey. That's just Albion that. Then obviously you get smashed by Norwich, but then you go to Derby with 5 at the back and turn in a really good performance. So I can understand why it took Portsmouth to be the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm glad that at least he admitted after Portsmouth that an aggregate score of 8-0 against two relegation rivals just cannot be sustainable in any way, shape, or form and change the shape. But I don't think, honestly, Jack, when you look at, as I say, when you look at the Borough game and the Derby result and game, I think the problem is that they sort of always, it's like papering over the cracks, isn't it? We kept having one. It was like one okayish performance, one horrendous one okay, one horrendous one, and that, I think that's why it took four games. But the bigger question mark is over why was he appointed, and also who appointed him, because obviously our president Andrew Nestor has departed the club by mutual consent in the last week. There's a lot of information flying around that he and Shilan Patel were not on the same page. They both seem to be saying that the other one hired Eric Ramsey, which frankly isn't much of a vote of confidence in the manager. So, you know, I think the bigger question mark is I'm glad Andrew Nestor is gone, not because I necessarily have a huge amount against Andrew Nestor, but we just cannot have a hierarchy where two of the top brasses at our football club seem to be on completely different pages, and
that eventually trickles down, doesn't it? I mean, that eventually, when there is problem upstairs, eventually it affects downstairs. I think that is something that we have probably seen in recent weeks. I mean, I feel a bit sorry for Eric Ramsey. You've got two blokes ahead of him who's just not taking any credit or any blame necessarily for that appointment. But
although if he pulls us out the mud, I wonder how fast they'll be taking credit for it.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? It's one of them, isn't it? They don't want to take credit for hiring out after 5-0 against Norwich. 3-0 against Coventry. But you know, you go to Blues and win, you get into the next round of the cup and we beat Coventry, and I bet they'll both be sticking their hands up and saying
let's see those statements in May. Let's see what happens then.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you so much for your time this evening, and look forward to catching up soon.
My pleasure.
Cheers. The next guest I will bring in Locks from Blue Tinted Glasses podcast on Leicester City, but now I'll bring in Freddie Webb from the PA Forecast. Freddie, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate your time. Well, you were the ones who defeated West Brom with that emphatic 3-0 victory. Has those kind of results, and maybe the performance at Preston last time out, albeit not the result, have they enthused you for what's to come in the last 16 games?
Yeah, the fans are a bit more positive after the January. Obviously, the West Brom game being at the top of that. I know West Brom were probably the worst performance overall from the away side at Fratton Park that season. But the fact that Pompey were able to click together, that really helped, and the key performances from some of the top players were there. Preston was disappointing. I mean, Adrian Segic's getting pretty much fouled in the penalty area. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that replay again. It's been all over Twitter for the last day or so. But it was a shame. There were some chances in, but the main problem with that Preston game, and the one thing that's keeping doubt in my head, is the clinical nature of the squad, and the fact that I still think in the front four, it's not quite right compared to last season. I mean, the team having 2 goals from their strikers all season, not many teams survive in the Championship with that sort of thing. Colby Bishop struggled and he's injured.
Yeah.
Mackenzie Kirk's very raw. I think he needs a season in League One, but afterwards he should be fine. He looks like he's got the qualities to be that all-round striker, but it's just a bit too early for him at 21. Yeah. And then in January, bringing in Jacob Brown, I understand why. Massive Championship experience. They probably looked at Luton and thought, hang on, they're going to loan him with only a proportion of the wages. They still think that Colby Bishop can come back and be that main striker. I think that's why they went for Jacob Brown rather than someone to go over the top of him. But I just think really it was the little...
just to come in there, if you don't mind. I think Portsmouth have recruited players for a certain way of playing, which is be really aggressive and athletic and constantly putting pressure against the opposition, because that's how you maximise the Fortress Fratton factor. So you've signed Ebu Adams, who is a real athlete in midfield, not necessarily a hugely technical footballer. Milic Ali, much better as a counter-attacking player than anything else, but very positive on turnovers. Jacob Brown, very good pressing forward with bags of running power. And so I can understand your point of view that you signed out Milic Ali, who's not necessarily starring in League One, and Jacob Brown as well. But they're players who might just be able to fit the identity and what you want to try and do, which makes me a little bit more positive about those kind of signings than maybe you would be on first glance.
Yeah, I like the signing of Ali already. Considering how he's played, he's incredibly direct. He's filled in for Josh Murphy incredibly well, because I'm not sure if you've seen the injury news with him recently. Yeah, it looks as if he's still going to be out for quite a while, and that's a massive blow. Still has 6 assists all season, and he's basically not been fit for 3 or 4 games in a row all year. And injuries has been the key factor of why Portsmouth are down here, as well as some other things. I think overall in January, they're looking at it and saying, okay, we like the signing of Ali just as he fits the style of play. PO forecast approved signing of Ibu Adams from the January transfer special. I will keep mentioning that over and over again. Absolutely no. And he's the exact sort of player Pompey wants in that midfield. There's a lack of depth there, which is a bit of concern. And considering the injuries all season, if Ibu Adams goes down, then that's going to be a major worry.
Yeah.
I understood why they brought in Keshi Anderson on a free, another player who fits that physical mold, who's able to be physical, win the ball, hike the pitch. I like that. He's got hamstring injury already, which is another start. And that's the main concern, really, from the Pompey fans. That if I had to boil it down to 2 key factors the rest of the season, it would be the injury record on some of the players. And you've probably heard this from other fans of championship clubs all season, the injuries being pretty horrendous, and the fact that really the board needs to do like a top to bottom review of why all these injuries are happening constantly, whether it's soft muscle, whether it's contact in actual games. There's been a mixture of all of them from key players this season. And it could be down to several factors. It could be the state of the pitches at the training ground. It could be the intense training methods, the whole train how you want to play thing, especially with a high press. That's going to be a factor. And presumably it's going to be a mix of all those things. It's going to be that. And I think it's going to be that sometimes a lack of quality in front of goal. And I think that showed against Preston, in all honesty. The fact that really Preston had that one key chance from a defensive error, and then they were able to take it away 1-0. The expected goals stats aren't great, considering that Pompey are now, they accumulated 32.3 expected for according to FOTMob, but they scored 27. That's probably the main thing. Defensively, I think Pompey are fine. Pompey are going to be able to defend properly, and they're going to be solid in the midfield for the rest of the season. So I don't think they're going to get stuffed anytime soon. But I just think it's in those those very close games. Have they got that little bit of ability to take it over a top and turn 1 point into 3, for example? And considering how tight the relegation battle is in the Championship at the moment, that's probably going to be the thing to switch it one way or another.
Freddie, you've got some tricky games next. I mean, I look at the fixtures. They're the ones that sort of the next chunk of 5. We sort of finished the first chunk, finished January, and then we're quickly moving on to the next set. Sheffield United, then 2-3 away trips. Charlton, Millwall, and Wrexham on the bounce. All teams won. A team down there with you in a way, Charlton, but not necessarily. They seem to have clawed the way out of it. And then Millwall and Wrexham are both pushing for a top 6 finish. What does this next set of 5 games look like for you? Because I mean, you wanted to ideally go into that next chunk with a better result than a 1-0 defeat at Preston. But again, they're up there this season as well. It feels like quite a difficult run. One of the most difficult runs, you'd say, of the season in terms of a bulk set of games.
Yeah, absolutely. Considering the away form of Pompey as well. Away form has been obviously better than last season, when last season was truly horrific. This season has been slightly better away, but not by much. Probably looking at these 5 games, and the fans are probably thinking, well, I know they look at teams like Sheffield United and Hull City higher up in the table with a better quality and etc. But they think, well, it's Fratton Park. If they're able to take 6 points from those 2 home games, let the away games fall where they may, if Pompey can nick a point or whatever. But then after that set of 5 games, if you look, there's a real run of games where it's teams that are around us. The biggest game, obviously, on the 7th of March, Blackburn away, which is massive. And then the home game against Swansea following that. Then at home to Derby, away to QPR, away to Norwich, and then at home to Oxford. So you've got that chunk of games where it's all going to be incredibly difficult, where they're all bunched up. Then you've got basically the chunk of games where I think Pompey can pretty much determine whether they're staying in the league or not. If they get a positive stretch out of those clusters of games, ideally getting wins against Blackburn and Oxford, they're probably fine. But again, I'm just looking at the rest of the teams and thinking, the quality of those teams are a little bit better, but the main thing keeping supporters positive really is Obviously, the manager. We talked about how good John Pochettino as a manager is and how tactically adaptable he is. But the fact also these players, they're going to run themselves into the ground for this team. There's going to be no instances of West Bromwich Albion where they go to an away game and just bin it off because all the players don't like the back three or whatever.
Yeah,
those players are going to run themselves. Yeah. The culture's there, and the manager's there to make those little tweaks. It just depends if he's got the right tools for the job at the time, and tools that are actually available and not broken with a hamstring injury or any other thing.
Absolutely. Freddie, thanks so much for your insights, and look forward to catching up with you later in the season.
Cheers. Thanks so much, Gabe.
Brilliant. We've got a few guests waiting, so thank you everyone for giving us your time. We've got Alfie Wilson from Oxford and All Rovers representation as well. But for now, I'm going to bring in Locks from Blue Tinted Glasses podcast on Leicester City. Locks, thanks so much for joining us. I imagine I'm going to ask you a similar question to the one I asked Chris, the West Bromwich Albion fan, which is, you didn't really expect to be in this position, did you?
No, mate. I think I've been on this channel with you probably 4 times so far this season, and every time I said, "Oh well, we'll get promoted in the end. It will happen. We'll make it there." But yeah, obviously, every time I've been, my hopes have been dropping, and now it's in the bin, mate. Yeah, we're not going up this season. It's been a weird one, mate. To be honest with you, I think a lot of Leicester fans would say the same here, and say that last season and this season have kind of merged into one. It just feels like the same long season, many of the same problems, the disappointment, the frustration, the anger from fans towards the team, the hierarchy. Yeah, it's not good at the minute, mate, to be a Leicester fan. It really isn't. I was speaking to somebody last night about it, and I said, it's the footballing gods. This is our punishment for the 10 years that we had, the amazing 10 years we had as Leicester supporters.
You wouldn't trade it, would you?
No, absolutely not. No.
I think Leicester on paper are a team that you would talk about as having lots of quality, and probably not a team that you would associate with being in this position. And there's maybe an assumption that you'd just be too good. But actually, with some of those cultural issues that I'm sure we're going to come on to, clearly you're not too good to go down.
No one's too good to go down. No, not at all. I think it's the Leicester situation is intriguing simply because it does feel like it's got progressively worse as the season's gone on, and you sort of felt like there might be a turn of the corner, and then I can't get worse than this. Oh no, we're going to fall down the table even further. And now suddenly, with a blink of an eye, playoff outsiders, then sort of mid-table. Should we stabilise a little bit? Oh, we're in February and we're now well and truly in a relegation battle, and that's what a bad run of form can do. Of course, obviously with the point deduction on top of that as well, which doesn't help. But you're now well and truly a part of it. You're now well and truly a part of that conversation. And the question now, of course, is whether or not you've got those players that I think. And also, the too good to go down comment's interesting because you still look at that Leicester squad and go, well, he's played in the Premier League. He's had success at this level before. We know what he can do. Yet, at the same time, does that really mean anything? Because ultimately, it's still got to come together. You've still got to have the fight. I know they're sort of blasé words, but you still got to have that other side of things beyond technical ability, beyond footballing ability, that can sort of allow you to deal with it, especially when that sort of expectation, similar to West Brom, has changed so much through the season. As players, you've also then got to change your expectation as well. Say 4 months ago, there was we could be playoff chasing players here in the Leicester City side. Oh no, we've now got to absolutely scrap for every single point and try and stay in the division. So, fans change their expectations, but so have players as well. So I'm intrigued to see whether or not those players have got the fight to stay in the Championship, because there are some players, of course, that are in a relegation battle in the Premier League last season as well. And I mean, they know what it's like to be relegated, albeit at a higher level.
They don't have the fight. I was going to say they don't have the fight. They don't. You talk about the other things away from the technical ability. On paper, this side technically should be getting promoted, in my opinion. Still, I know it's not the squad it was 2 years ago, but the players in there. I mean, you look at Jordan James, what he's doing, single-handedly, basically carried us this season. He's now injured. It's not a surprise that we're getting the results we are right now. I actually think this is, it might surprise you, it might not, because like I said, if you went back to when I was on with you earlier in the season, Gab, I was still hopeful of automatic promotion. I think we are going to go down to League One.
Oh my God!
I think,
so you think you will drop?
I do think we'll drop. I do think we'll drop. There is this squad. You speak about too good to go down. It was the same 3 years ago now in the Premier League. I mean, you look at a team 3 years ago that had Yuri Tielemans, James Maddison, Harvey Barnes, Jamie Vardy, Wilfred Ndidi, Ricardo Pereira. That team was too good to go down from the Premier League, and it did. And this season, the parallels are like insane. The parallels to that season are absolutely insane. It feels exactly as it did 3 years ago in the Premier League. The players, we've been debating for a long time whether they were playing for Marti Cifuentes. I don't think they were necessarily not playing for Marti Cifuentes. I just don't think they're really playing for the club. They're not playing for the fans. We still have a group of players in this team that are leaving at the end of the season who have wanted out for at least a year. Harry Winks is one of them players. Boubacar Samari, who's now gone in January, he was another one. Wout Faes, he's now gone. But there are still some at the club that want to leave, and they're not putting in 100%. They're not, they're pulling out of challenges. You can see it, man. You can see, they're not running for the shirt. They're not running for the club.
You can see it. Would you get? Sorry, can I just come in there? Like,
yeah.
Would you get Nigel Pearson in for the rest between now and the end of the season? So
the manager situation is interesting. I mean, I think this shows how it's the perfect example of why the fans are so frustrated with the hierarchy. I mean, it's been 2 weeks, 2 games, 6 points down the drain since we got rid of Marti Cifuentes, and Nigel Pearson would absolutely be one that every Leicester fan, there isn't one that wouldn't get behind it. The stadium is flat. It's half empty or 3/4 empty. And if Nigel Pearson was in charge, he won't be tomorrow night, but if it was tomorrow night, if he was in charge, that stadium's packed to the rafters, the atmosphere's electric, and that can go a long way to helping the team on the pitch. But it's not going to happen. From what we've heard, our local journalists have heard from Nigel Pearson's agent, and apparently he's not even been contacted. Apparently there's a little bit of bad blood between the board. Nigel Pearson was close with the chairman that died, Vishai. Not so much with the son. In fact, during the Great Escape season for Leicester, actually, 10 years ago now, he was actually sacked by our current owner, Top, and reinstated the same day by the chairman who died, Vishai. So there's a bit of bad blood between them. So it's not going to be him. But as you say, I mean, I've been looking at there's been a lot of movements on the odds. Some markets suspended. At the moment, Russell Martin is still favourite. I mean, if that was to happen, I think the fan base would go into... It would be an all-timer. Well, it would be an all-timer of a day on social media for Leicester fans. It would be hysterical if that was to happen. But Michael Skubala, a lot of movement on him. Dean Smith as well, who obviously tried to keep us up in the Premier League for a few games. So there's so many names in the mix, but no one really has an idea.
The Skubala's interesting. It's just, unfortunately, and this, you're an honest fan. It's not attractive enough, is it? That is the problem. And the size of the football club certainly is. The quality in the squad, I think, can't be doubted. But those two things alone aren't going to keep you in any league. But with the issues above, the issues out of a fan's control, that's the bit that's unattractive. I mean, I just had a look at the league table there. West Brom, Leicester, Blackburn, Sheffield Wednesday, all from 20th below. There's a common theme there. All issues in the boardroom, all issues above the playing level. And that is no coincidence. The correlation is that eventually, if there's problems above, that does trickle down and start affecting results on the pitch. Because, like you say, it's the details. Like, fans don't really like the owners; they're not going to turn up as much, and they're not going to be committed enough. And then suddenly, that then can result into poor performances. And that's just one tiny element to what can factor into a relegation battle. But that's a common theme. I think the problem in terms of appointing a new manager is you've got to have someone that's going to come in. Whether that be to the end of the season, that's a question for you, mate. Is this one you take to the end of the season? Do you go and the Marti Cifuentes clearly wasn't one to the end of the season. Ideally, that felt like one that was going to be on a longer term basis. But going forward and appointing someone, where do you go now? I don't know if you can attract a manager that's going to know they're going to be here for 3 years, because they probably won't.
I mean, it was interesting hearing Gary Rowett on the weekend on TV talking about the Leicester job. Obviously, he is linked to it, and he did say, and I agree with you about it not being a very attractive job at the moment, but he did say, and I kind of agree to some degree, that there are a lot of managers that would still love to take over.
Sure.
And, you know, I mean, the Skubala one, for example, you know, he's doing very well in League One. If he could come to Leicester, Lincoln are up in the Championship and he's in League One with Leicester next season. That's a possibility. It's tough. I think, look, the facilities still are exceptional with the training ground. There's some really exciting youth at the club. I think there will be a lot of managers that look at the squad, and I know we talk about the problems kind of with the mentality and things like that, but there will be a lot of managers that look at the squad and say, I fancy it. I fancy taking that over, keeping them up. And if I keep them up, I might get the full-time gig in the summer. And, you know, what would I do? Yeah, I'm kind of swaying towards kind of what you hinted at about bringing somebody in on a 6-month basis, see out the season. If they do, you know, and then judge it at the end of the season, right? If we feel like we want him to continue beyond that point, you can do that. And if not, then you can sever that relationship. But for me, I agree. Gary Rowett, Skubala, they're probably my top 2 picks at the moment. Nigel Pearson would be one, but I don't think that's happening. So,
Gab, I'd say a question I'd ask you actually would be, if you're Brian Murphy, who's obviously the Cardiff manager, doing extremely well. If you're Michael Skubala, of course, is doing fantastic things for Lincoln City. If you put yourself in either their shoes, or maybe you've got an opinion on it anyway, without having to pretend you're one of the most successful League One managers at this moment in time, might be easier. It's up to you. Would you jump ship to Leicester City at this current stage? If I said to you tonight, you have to make a decision, you stay at the teams that probably the most attractive managers at League One level, and then go and take a Leicester job, was that something you would do?
No, for different reasons in those respective cases. So I think with Skubala, what he's done is in the context of a really well-run club that's a very smooth operation, and the culture's been shaped a certain way. And I think lots of managers who have been successful at a certain level struggle when they get to a higher level, because so much of it's about managing egos and culture. And I think it really needs a firm hand who's good on that kind of thing when it comes to Leicester City. And I feel a little bit similar with Brian Murphy, because I think he's an unbelievable coach, and I think he's got a huge future in the game. But I think he's very process driven, and I actually think Leicester needs something a little bit different right now, which is why I would go for Nigel Pearson or Gary Rowett if Pearson doesn't want it. Conversely, it's also why I probably wouldn't go to Leicester if I was in the position of those 2 managers.
A funny thing there as well, you mentioned Brian Murphy. Obviously, he was at Leicester last season as a coach, and he actually had a big falling out with the players because they just weren't listening to him in the training sessions. And there was a big row off the... Well, yeah, but no, that's my point, right? What you were saying, Gab, about, you know, he is very process driven, and maybe they do need a firmer hand. There is a worry, though, at the end of the day, because when we were linked with Sean Dyche, you know, last summer and before, there's a worry that this squad, they won't take too kindly to a strong hand, right? You know, somebody coming in and telling them what.
I don't think that's how the club should approach it. I think you're pointing the strong hand, and you give them the power between now and the end of the season to say, this is the culture that we're setting, and you've got to fit into that culture if you want to play for this football club. And if not, we'll gladly put you out into the reserves, and you won't play for this football club again. But they've got to start with cultural foundations. That's got to be the starting point for Leicester City.
And that's the thing, Gab. You know, that's what Marty Cifuentes tried to do with Harry Winks. He didn't want anything to do with Harry Winks. It was a game, I can't remember who it was against. I want to say it was Sheffield United back in November maybe. And Harry Winks, I mean, it was one of the worst first half performances I've ever seen. He was, like I said, pulling out of challenges, jogging around the pitch, and he never played again under Marty Cifuentes. He was expelled. He went into the reserves, training with the under-21s allegedly. And the game after, Marty Cifuentes is sacked. Who's back into the squad? Harry Winks. Now, for me, that's out of order. Harry Winks has disrespected, you know, even though these managers weren't necessarily liked by the fans, but he disrespected Steve Cooper. He disrespected Ruud van Nistelrooy. He did the same to Marty Cifuentes. More importantly, he disrespected the club and the fans.
Disgusting. So Harry
and he's
Winks
back in.
I wonder. I really don't like to cast aspersions about people because without knowing what went on behind closed doors, and I think that can be a dangerous game. But at the same time, it does make me suspicious that, you know, was Harry Winks on the phone to John Rudkin and does that raise question marks about player power at Leicester City? And of course, football evolves, and you've got to treat players differently. You know, this isn't the 90s anymore, but at the same time, the tail can't wag the dog. And I think at Leicester City, the tail's wagging the fox.
Well, this is what we're saying, man. A lot of Leicester fans, with where we are now, you know, no longer attracting the top players, right, like we once did. A lot of Leicester fans are like, you know, that's good for, you know, we want the honest players, we want the hard working, maybe not got the most quality, right, but the ones that are going to come in and actually fight, because we haven't seen it as Leicester fans, bar a couple, and there are some that, I mean, Jordan James has been a revelation for us. There's no way he stays like next season. I mean, we've got an option to buy, but I'd be very surprised if he decided to come to Leicester. I imagine there's going to be a lower end Premier League team maybe who would like him, but there's just a lot going wrong at Leicester. You mentioned John Rudkin. He's not going anywhere, and what you just hinted at, mate, you are bang on. There have been reports over the last couple of weeks that players have been going over the manager's head to the director of football and beyond, and the owner. And I think, mate, from speculation I've seen and heard, that is what happened to Steve Cooper. That's why Steve Cooper lost his job. Players went right over his head, and he lost his job.
And I mean, that is speculation, obviously. But I come back to the point, without offending Leicester City fans, in that for a new manager isn't really what you want to hear. I mean, every manager sort of comes in and believes that they can be the one that turns the ship, and they're the new manager that's going to come in, and the culture is going to be amazing when they walk through the door. We've seen jobs that don't look great. A manager takes it, they sort of bring that sense of, you know, aura, if you like, and then suddenly the same thing happens to them, but they believe that in that moment they're the ones that can change things. But that's the point. I don't think the size, the facilities, the talent that is there is the reason why a manager wouldn't want this job. If anything, that's the reason why a manager would want this job. It's things like player power, speculation of players going above the manager, and that's before someone's even taken the job. Players not showing that mentality because they are in a dogfight, whether they want to accept it or not, whether they think they are playoff pushers, or even top two pushers in some people's eyes, maybe before the season started. And last season were Premier League footballers. The reality is they need just to take one look at the league table and they'll realise very quickly that they're not. And the most important thing they can do is obviously pick up results in the short term to survive. That's the current.
They need a rude awakening. Yeah.
And there's a denial. There's a denial at the club, Gab. Sorry, just finally, there's a denial at the club, at the hierarchy of where we are at the. I mean, I'm sure you guys probably heard of the owner, the interviews that the owner did a couple of weeks ago now, and you know, he was asked in one of the questions, what are the implications to Leicester City if they don't go up this season? And the owner laughed and said, we'll go up next year. And it's like, read the room. And
but that's where football fans, and I'm talking football fans, know football, and they know their club, and they know their club better than actually some owners know their football club, and they also know this league more than they know. But the Championships, again, let's be careful how we sort of paint people's brushes. We've never met these people, and we don't know their intelligence. They might be really intelligent and just didn't show it maybe in the best way in that interview. But there's you can almost sort of see it as the guy probably goes, well, we're in the Premier League. We've been in the Premier League for quite a long time. We had one good Championship season. We got promoted. So all we really know about the Championship in recent years is, well, we won it. And so it can't be that tricky, it can't be that much of a struggle. But actually, you've never been this low in the Championship in recent years compared to obviously the period in which you went on to win the Premier League. So I think it's a worry. Have you got the people in place above that actually are honest?
Well, we're awaiting a technical director. Apparently, it's imminent. But that technical director is going to be reporting to John Rudkin. So how much will change, we don't really know. Yeah.
We'll see. Listen, Locks, thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to catching up on other dogfight chats between now and the end of the season.
Great to see you both. Nice one, lads. See you in a bit. Bye-bye.
Just a quick note to the three people waiting. Thank you so much for your patience. I really appreciate it. We've had some really fascinating chats with particularly West Brom and a Leicester fan this evening, and sometimes time runs away from us because we're very passionate about our teams, but really appreciate your patience. We will be joined by Alfie Wilson, who's an Oxford United fan, but for now we're going to be joined by our All Rovers representative. Sorry, sir, I think I'm not sure I've caught your name just yet.
It's Luke. Nice to meet you, mate.
Luke, lovely to meet you. Thank you for joining us to talk about Blackburn Rovers. Are all eyes on the next managerial appointment for Rovers at the moment?
I guess it depends who you ask. For me, I've been saying that Valérien Ismaël was the wrong man since the day he walked through the door. But obviously, you always have to give a manager every chance to prove themselves.
Mhm.
However, he never really wanted to build that connection with the fan base, and he never really wanted to build the team, in my opinion. We lost a lot of key players over the summer, didn't we? And we've replaced them with some poor quality players. Not all of them have been poor. I know we've got Alabayos, who's absolutely magic.
I like him. Yeah, very athletic, isn't he, Ali Biossi?
He's brilliant. Same with Good Johnson. He's looking like a decent player. But the issue now stands is 12 months later, after we've appointed Valérien Ismaël on, I think it was a 3-year contract, is we're once again searching for a new manager. And a lot of the names that are coming out, I just look at them and I go, you look very John Eustace-like. And why are you going back to that when you wanted to get rid of that?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, do you see that as a bad thing? Because I think John Eustace did a fantastic job and got you. I mean, you had one season under Thomason, didn't you, where you looked like you might get to
Yeah.
playoffs. But other than that, it's been pretty uneventful for Blackburn Rovers, you would say.
Yeah, I love John Eustace. I loved everything he stood for, and I love everything he did for this football club. And I think a lot of Blackburn Rovers fans do forget about our hierarchy and about our situation and about how managers have been treated in the past. And I think the way that John Eustace left was massive. I think it's hard to say, but from what I've heard from people inside the club and a lot of the players that have left, there all seems to be this common conception that it wasn't his fault that he left. He didn't just walk away. I heard that it was he gave them the chance to stay, and they didn't want that. They wanted to take the compensation and rebuild under someone else, which hurts. So in terms of wanting something different from John Eustace, I'd love to bring anybody like that in. However, what I think from a standpoint is it's principle for Rudiger Stead and Sulhul Pasha, who now have to go, look, 12 months ago we failed this football club. We brought in Valérien Ismaël. It was a wrong decision, but they'll never do that. So I feel like if they bring in, say, Gary Rowett, I think he's a very similar manager to John Eustace.
Yeah.
If it's any longer than a 6-month deal, I believe that the way they've forced John Eustace out of the football club was for absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
I wonder, generally, with Gary Rowett, I've experienced Gary Rowett quite well very recently. He was our last manager, and he kept us up last season. That was a massive achievement for Oxford United. I mean, that was a job that not many people thought was going to be taken by someone like Gary Rowett. I mean, I know his football isn't sometimes the most attractive, but his record in the Championship is really, really good, especially when it comes to teams down the bottom end. So to clarify on that, is Gary Rowett someone you would take as a fan base? You said that, and I understand the point. The point is, and I think what you've said there, which is true, you've made a decision to change direction. Are you, is it that principle that going back is actually showing signs of progression? Probably not. But actually, is it important, do you think, as fans to actually just realise, similar to Leicester in some ways, this is where we currently are? I think we've almost got to abandon what the plan looks like in 3 years. I think we need to actually understand what the situation is right now. And if the situation right now requires someone of Gary Rowett's ilk, that feels like the most sensible appointment.
Yeah, so I think if you ask a lot of Rovers fans at the start of the season where they thought we were going to finish the season, it wouldn't have involved speaking of the playoffs. I think it involved a scrap at the bottom or mid-table. Now, for me, and obviously Ollie Collins, I've spoken to Ollie Collins a lot, and our thing was always that Valérien Ismaël will be gone by Christmas, and we will be towards the bottom end of the league. Now, we do need somebody like Gary Rowett. We need that sort of... So the thing with Rovers at the minute, I don't know if I've said this, but with Ismaël, I believe that he brought in a horrible mentality in the sense of we seem to be victims instead of fighters, whereas John Eustace was a fighter and not a victim.
Well, the other
like
thing I would, if you don't mind me jumping in on that, Luke, because I think you've raised a really good point. I also think that Valérien Ismaël, I think he's actually a very intelligent manager, but I don't know if he's very good at people management. I've spoken to people who have worked with him and they've said he can be a little bit shy, a little bit keeps himself to himself, a little bit elusive perhaps. Whereas if you look at managers who have been the most successful at Blackburn Rovers, I would say Tony Mowbray, very good people skills. I would say John Eustace, very good people skills, brings people together. Thomason,
bit
like
iffy.
hear your thoughts on, but
Bit
definitely that thing of man management, motivating people and creating that togetherness. I think that's a really important.
Rowett had a very, very good track record of people managing Oxford United. I know it's sort of been that the case as well at previous clubs he's been at in terms of galvanising a place. And as I think his relationship with the players was actually better than the fans. That was something that was interesting with Gary Rowett. I think he isn't someone, we've got Bloomfield now, he isn't someone that is maybe going to throw fist pumps at the end of a game and get the fans going in that sense. But his relationship with players, I think he prioritises, which is important because he sees them on a day-to-day basis and they're the ones that are going to win football matches.
The other thing, Jack, on that as well, Gary Rowett, whenever he's left a club, you always feel like he's left it in the most harmonious way possible.
Yeah, exactly. And nobody has bad words to say about him.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that shows he's got some brilliant values, and he's just like, he's clearly a pleasure to deal with because he's got good humility. He's happy to walk away if, people feel like someone. So he has those kind of values, and I think that makes a difference. I really do.
In terms of who's on the list, I think Gary Rowett is clear favourite. Like, in my opinion, the first name that came out was Slavan Vilic. I looked at it, I was like, right, okay. For me, there's always a reason why a manager hasn't managed in England for such a long time. That's how I feel about it. And then the other one was Chris Coleman, and I don't know if you see him, but that raised a lot of eyebrows. He has a very close connection to Steve Keane, and that had gone down terribly. So I do think though, like with Rovers, and I know it sounds mad. I believe that a lot of the time the decisions are made off the majority of what Rovers fans online are thinking, because it's really random. We're getting all these other names like, Harris is on standby, or Michael O'Neill's on standby, all from Alan Nixon, a great journalist. But sometimes I sit there and I think it's weird how we always seem to go with the manager that everybody seems to like on social media. I always find that really fascinating.
Absolutely.
But I will say about the Gary Rowett thing, galvanising the squad and this togetherness, we need that. We really do need that.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't just mean that the players need to buy into that. The hierarchy need to buy into that, and I don't think they will. Rudiger said is having an eventful time at Rovers, shall we say? And there's a lot of key members of staff that have left. We had our player liaison officer Leslie, who took voluntary redundancy over the summer. And she was a massive part to this team, a massive part to this football club. And it just doesn't feel like there's anybody connected to Blackburn at Blackburn Rovers anymore. It doesn't feel like our club.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, I think that's a really important point that you've raised, Luke, but I also wanted to ask you a question on selection, obviously under Damien Johnson's interim guidance. I did feel, although I'd give you some credit at Norwich for keeping them somewhat at arm's length until they scored 2 late goals, but I also watched the full 90 of that game sort of retrospectively, because I think Norwich put it up. And I felt like it looked a little bit imbalanced because he didn't really have like a proper left side. It was either Cash in, or it's like a left wing back in about 5, and then Morahita ahead of him. So not really a natural left sider on that side in either of those positions. It was kind of like a 5-3-1-1 shape, wasn't it? And you've got Todd Cantwell in the number 10 spot behind Yuki Ahashi. And I feel like with Cantwell, I'm not sure he suits that second forward pressing role where you've got to be really aggressive against the ball. I'd probably rather someone of a different profile in that kind of remit. So just from a selection point of view, I wondered how you felt about that and what kind of changes need to be made.
Personally, I don't really think Damien Johnson has done an awful lot wrong. I think he's stuck to the same system as what Valerian Ismail was playing with. I do find it really fascinating that Harry Pickering and Yuri Ribeiro are just being overlooked completely, because they're two very established players at this level who could definitely help us out in the situation.
And Cashin, Luke, has got no turn of pace as a centre half. So to play him as a left wing back, I'm not sure. I'd much rather have Pickey in there.
I believe that Cashin enjoys playing at that side of the pitch, but if it's at our best interest, I don't think
sorry,
it is. I do think
is Cashin playing as a left wing back in a 3 and
a back 5.
So in a back 5,
it really does.
3 centre backs
really does
being played. Cashin's the left wing back.
I think so.
It really does depend. So, for instance, now we've got Hayden Carter coming back from injury. That's now why Cashin's moved over. It must be something to do with his contract, or else they just have Pickering there. That's all I can think.
Really? You think he's
Yeah.
been played there for contractual reasons?
In my opinion, yeah. I think he would be better suited at centre back, and in the situation
You're in a
we're in, I think
relegation
that was
dogfight, Luke, and you're playing a
Listen,
centre half who doesn't have a turn of pace at
this
left
football
wing back
club
for
is
financial reasons. When
crazy.
if you get relegated, you're in financial chaos.
I mean that does sound shocking.
This
But when
football
Luke said
club
a second
is
ago
absolutely
that
mental.
when Luke said a second ago that there's a manager in Eustace that may have left the club because of compensation, and the club actually taking the compensation, that doesn't necessarily surprise me massively. But Cashin is not a left wing back. He's never played left wing back. He's a centre back.
About the financial thing, we mentioned about Eustace. One that I think you both are probably very much aware of is deadline day. We sold Dominic Hyam to Wrexham, and that has been the need. That's been the knife in the back sort of thing. We didn't replace him. I think Cashin has now come in to replace him. However, with Hayden Carter coming back in, I don't think Cashin fits into that back line. I do think he's better than Sean McLaughlin, but I think McLaughlin's the experience he want there.
Absolutely. Do you think Blackburn stay up, Luke?
Everybody comes on to say no. They speak about how there's no passion, there's no this, there's no that. But I can say honestly, I've watched Blackburn Rovers for a long time. I've been going. I've 17 years. I've been going to watch Blackburn Rovers. And there's only one other season I can pinpoint and say it was as bad as, and that would be under Owen Coyle when we got relegated to League One.
16,
the difference
17.
is this time there is genuinely no fight, no passion, no care, and no love. Not just on the pitch, but off the pitch. And it seems like it's all bubbling together, and they just look like they can't be bothered.
Gosh, worrying times for Blackburn Rovers then. Thanks for joining us, Luke, and really appreciate your time, and hopefully catch you up again soon.
No worries. Nice one. See you later.
Great stuff. Jack, we've run a little bit longer than expected in certain areas. Can I just take your temperature in terms of time? Have you got another 20 minutes or so for us?
Yeah, I've got we can. I've got a podcast after this. Can we? Yeah, 15, 20. Let's do it. Yeah, that's fine.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll be mindful of time constraints. I'll bring on Dan Finch from Charlton Athletic, and then we'll come back to Alfie. Dan, thanks so much for talking to us. Are you a little bit relieved that maybe some of those additions in January and recent form have sort of eased your relegation concerns?
Yeah, I think we were smart in January. The business was exactly what we needed. It still lacked. I still think that creative midfielder that I've spoke about on here with you for I think 2 years now. But in general, I think the Lyndon Dykes was a massive get. I think if you've watched us over the last couple of games, he's completely changed the way that our forward line works. And actually having a left back, Luke Chambers, has really changed things. And Connor Cody's been really good as well. So I think the acquisitions were smart.
Yeah, I think with Connor Cody in particular, he seems like a character that would respond well to a Nathan Jones sort of management style, because Nathan Jones is very passionate, wears his heart on his sleeve, says what he thinks. And Connor Cody, I suppose, is a similar character. And I suppose when you've got an alignment, I suppose, between the character of the management and the character of the leaderships in the players, that can make a difference.
Yeah, and we've got a very young squad, all the way around. So to get that bit of experience, and obviously we've been playing him in midfield, which I think no one saw coming until the team sheet came out against Leicester, has really brought just a little bit of sturdiness and understanding. You can see the difference on the pitch just from him talking. So, like you said, I think he is Nathan Jones on the field, a bit less energetic, because who is more energetic than Nathan Jones?
I was gonna say, Dan, I sort of did a piece when I was looking for everyone's transfer window, and I sort of looked at it a little bit before the deadline day finished to get an initial idea. And when I first looked at it, I'll be honest, I looked at Charlton's window and I thought, it's okay. It's all right. It's not blowing me away. But in terms of an audition for new additions, I think Leicester City was probably one of the best ones, because, we look at the impact of Chambers on the left-hand side. He looks really good. Harry Clark, I've always thought has been a great operator at the Championship level, been very unlucky with injuries and played in some top sides at this level. He's come in and done really well. Much needed versatility at the back. And it's amazing, isn't it? It's the proof, and probably the reason why I shouldn't say this too much because it's going to stop people from watching those videos that I make. But judge a window when they play, because I think that's really, really important. Because on paper, it didn't blow me away, but actually they're exactly the players that were plugging the gaps that you were sort of needing bodies in before January, and already they look like they're making a really strong impact.
Yeah, I mean, going out of Christmas, we were calling for wing backs on both sides of the ball. James Bree was with us, but was having a disappointing time. We were playing Tyrese Campbell on the left, and I think teams knew that they could take advantage of his defensive abilities. Obviously, he plays as a striker most of the time for us. So getting Chambers and Clark in were the two big ones, I think, for me personally. And then, like we said, Dykes, I think, has made a big physical difference. I think Leeburn is a big man, but doesn't always play like a big man. So Dykes being that big man and having a target forward has really been useful for us. And getting, I mean, you see the Leicester game that you brought up. Luke Chambers' cross for Lyndon Dykes is superb.
Confident you're going to beat the drop then, Dan?
Yeah, I think we're lucky. I think just listening to the last two guys that were on before me. One, it's nice to not be in that position anymore as a Charlton fan, to not have that ownership problem.
Yeah,
but two,
you can recognise it, I imagine.
yeah, we've been there. But when I think when the clubs are in downfall, like those clubs are, it's very easy to just keep spiraling. I think actually there is still quite a bit of positivity at the Valley, even though we are where we are. I think we're 19th right now. There's still that positivity of what the next steps could be, rather than looking over our shoulders like the rest.
Absolutely. Well, seeing as we've overrun a little bit in other areas, we'll keep this one short and sweet tonight, Dan. But I'm sure I look forward to catching up with you later in the season, and hopefully Charlton can put even more daylight between themselves and the drop zone.
That'll sound good to me.
Top man. Cheers, mate.
Dan. Thank you, mate.
So my final guest for the evening is Oxford United fan Alfie Wilson, hopefully able to talk to us. Are you unmuted?
I think so. Here's the test. Sorry if it's an echoey room. All
Great
good.
stuff.
Yeah, just to go back to your first question, Gab, you asked me about how I would rate Bloomfield so far. I think in a nutshell, my favourite thing is clean sheets. I think a lot of narrative last season from certain sections of the fan base, or just that Rowett's style of football got a bit drab. And it was kind of quite tedious to watch our games and go and attend them. I think really the most alarming thing to me was how we were just completely unable to keep clean sheets in games. Really, I think we only kept 2 under Rowett, QPR away, and Derby at home.
That's the thing, isn't it, Alfie? I think you can tolerate the football a bit more if you have those solid, if that conservatism gives you some solid foundations that allows you to churn out a reasonable flow of results, which I kind of expected from you this season, which is why I had you around 19th before the campaign. But because I think maybe the squad was 3 or 4 players off where you needed to be, going into the after the summer window, it kind of put you on the back foot. The squad players, a lot of the players maybe weren't at the level you're looking for, and then that combined with a style of football that isn't for everyone, and the results not being there, obviously it put Gary in a difficult position, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. To bring it back into the present, the only other thing I would say about Bloomfield so far is Jamie McDonnell being quite a revelation, and he's played 4 or 5 games for us, and he might already be my favourite Oxford player since Alex Gorin. Our first kind of profile of midfielder like him since Alex Gorin, and the profile of midfielder I thought might be dead.
The new Mickey Lewis.
Yeah, exactly. Or just a bit before my time, Mickey Lewis. But yeah, I would say maybe Adam Murray, I guess, my hero, or someone like that. That's been a great positive as well.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. As an Oxford United fan myself, I've sort of listened to the conversations we've had with the other guys before this, and it's really interesting. The one thing that Oxford certainly have got is, I think you look at the teams above Oxford, there's so much unrest with the teams above, and I think we sort of feel fairly content and it doesn't feel as drastic as the issues that the teams above us are facing, which I think is
100%.
massively beneficial for us, because we want to be the underdogs. We know we're the underdogs. We're 23rd in the league. We're Oxford United in the Championship. We can say that as fans. Others can't. But it's one of those where we can use that, I think, to our advantage, because we know that if we stay up, it's from this position a miraculous achievement.
Yeah.
If we go down, obviously no fan wants to think of it like that, but I think our January's put us in a place where we look much stronger if we do get relegated. I think our manager puts us in a much stronger place if we get relegated as well, personally. And I think that might benefit us, the fact that we're not in turmoil. We haven't got issues with our ownership. We haven't got massive unrest. There isn't sort of toxicity within the fan base. I think if we go down, we can all look at each other and go, well, I think the golfing quality has cost us at times this season, as we thought it would do. But I think that might work in Oxford's favour. It's not nice to sort of say that about other teams and to the gentleman that I've just spoken to, but it's true. I think that might actually help Oxford United in the long run until the end of the season.
I completely agree, Jack. Yeah. No, I was just going to say, well, firstly on the League One point, Bloomfield was the only one of the properly rumoured candidates who I'd be even vaguely happy with as a manager in League One should we go down there. And then secondly, I completely agree with what Jack says about the sides above us. I know, I think I said this last season. I mean, I certainly said it down the pub in terms of 46-47 will do it. Which wouldn't have done it last season, but I really do think that 46-47 will do it this season. Okay. I think that Leicester and West Brom are quite poor in particular, and all it takes is just a couple of match days where we get points on the board and they don't, and then the whole dynamic of the race changes really. Yeah. And not only does the dynamic of the relegation battle change, but you'll also get not only Leicester, West Brom, Blackburn fans being like, oh no, Oxford are on our shoulder. This is now even worse. This is now going to get even more toxic. Yeah. But I think, those players might start to feel it as well.
Alfie, I find the comparison between Oxford's situation and that of Leicester and West Brom a really fascinating one, because my logical brain and my instinctive brain sort of tell me different things, because logically Leicester and West Brom have on paper so much better squads than Oxford United. I don't think that's an insult to you guys. I think that's just realistic based on the profile of players, if we're talking from a technical level and where some of those players have played. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. Yeah. And yet, which dressing room would I rather be in, where you've got Matt Bloomfield, who I think is a very good leader, but also a group of players that will be fighting tooth and nail to try and stay up, and have already got some decent return. I think it's only 2 defeats in 6 so far under Bloomfield, 5 or 6 games. So you're getting points from games, whereas Leicester and West Brom have been on a real plummeting down, and Leicester certainly have got some major cultural issues, and West Brom possibly with fitness as well. And I think there's major problems and there's major pressure at those clubs. So I find it a really interesting one to compare the situations. And I sort of don't know which is the more favourable position to be in. I really don't.
I think to Alfie, just before you say this, I think, and you probably will agree with this as well, what is also important with the dressing rooms, you sort of mentioned that there, the type of players we've got in the dressing room too, players like Cameron Brannigan, who have played, I think, over, I think it's 300 odd games, I think, with Sam Long as well. You've got players that are absolutely desperate. You've got players that are desperate to be Oxford United players, which is so important, and also players that are desperate to keep Oxford United in the highest possible league that they could play in their career, potentially. I don't think Cameron Brannigan and Sam Long are going to make Premier League moves. So they're desperate to stay in the Championship with Oxford United, because they know that's their best chance of staying at this level. I think that's so helpful. And we can sort of sometimes forget that. And there'll be games like, Sheffield United, what was it, about a week ago? And we sort of all walked away from that and we said, I think this is probably the level, this is the problem we've got. This feels like a quality level, not an effort level, it's a quality level. And sometimes you've got to put your hands up and go, there's going to be teams in this league, and they might even be 16th in Sheffield United's case. I know Sheffield United season and their squad's a difficult one to sort of judge, but there will be times this season, and there have been so many times where we've just had to walk away and go, it's massively disappointing, but this is sometimes a quality issue. But I'd much rather it be a quality issue than a cultural issue. I don't know if you agree with that, Alfie.
No, I completely agree, and I think it's really important for us as a fan base to realise that, you know, even if we go on quite a good run until the end of the season, we are going to have at least 4 or 5 more defeats before the end of the season where we're completely out of the game and we look hopeless. And the important thing is just to realise that that's a nature of, you know, that's part and parcel of a relegation battle, and to put it behind you as quickly as possible and get ready for the next one. And I think in terms of the kind of like macro factors, just discussion here about the relegation battle, we've got kind fixtures left. We've still got West Brom.
We've pretty much got every team down there at home.
Yeah, exactly. I think Portsmouth is our only away trip out of the sides among us. Jack, not 100% sure.
Away. We've played West Brom away. Still got Sheffield United at home, Charlton at home, and obviously Norwich tomorrow. So, you know, I think we're safe, to be honest. I think we're fine.
But by the way, did you guys see the celebration of Matt Bloomfield and Mike Dodds after you won at Leicester?
Yeah,
I was giving him the fist bumps back from.
I was thinking of before that where they had a rather intimate moment between the two of them.
Yeah, it did.
And they seem to have a really nice dynamic, because I think Matt Bloomfield is a very front-footed leader, a very sort of proactive manager, good at the sort of leadership style and running a group of people. And I think Mike Dodds is a very intelligent technical coach, very good on a one-to-one basis with individual players. So I think between them, I think there's makings of a really nice partnership, and that's something I'm really excited about for next season, whether that's in the Championship or League One. So do you think Oxford are going to do it, Alfie?
Do you know what? I would say if we're out of a drop zone by the start of April, I think we'll see it out.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just whether we get there. The other key thing that gives me optimism is I just think Leicester and West Brom are rubbish. And I mean, I think West Brom are out of dice to roll. It depends, obviously, who Leicester's manager, who they get into replace Cifuentes is. I don't know if they've already replaced him. But yeah, I would say those are the kind of 2 key things that give me optimism.
Absolutely.
So we'll see.
Alfie, thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate your time this evening. Likewise to Jack, my co-host. Cheers, mate. Jack, thank you so much for giving me the extra time, a bit longer than planned. So really appreciate your help this evening. Thanks to all my guests. Thanks to you for watching at home. You can subscribe to EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify. And there's also a membership option for bonus content on YouTube as well. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you again for another Championship podcast next week.